Ladies, gentlemen, and the often forgotten, but not by me, Hyundai Tiburons, welcome to the channel and welcome to episode 3 of Project Windfall. Today we're going to talk about the most important part of any car, and that's the brake pedal. Mario Andretti once said, "It's amazing how many drivers, even at the Formula 1 level, think that brakes are for slowing the car down." This might be my second favorite quote in the wide world of motorsport. This pedal right here makes you fast. This guy, forget him, overrated. This pedal makes champions. Driving legend Jackie Stewart said that the reason he was able to win as much as he did is because he came off the brakes smoother than anyone else on the grid. To him, being smooth was everything, and that's the real purpose of the brake pedal. You're going to use it like a chauffeur. Smooth weight transfer keeps the car balanced. Balance means more grip. The brake pedal is how you'll learn to dance with the car. Before we get started, a quick aside. Unless the car you're driving requires the operation of a clutch pedal, you need to be left foot braking. Just be aware, most people new to left foot braking are going to apply way too much force as they're used to actuating a clutch pedal. Don't stress it too much. Just find a good setup, keep your heel planted on the floor and close to the point of rotation. If your heel is like hovering over the pedal and stabbing at it with all the big muscle groups in your leg, you're probably overslowing the car, messing with the balance, and you're going to get tired really fast. So let's start with understanding what happens when you press the brake pedal, namely weight transfer. That is, as the car slows down, Newtonian physics tells us that inertia shifts the weight forward, and that causes three big things to happen. First, the front tires get more grip, the rear tires get less grip. To a point, we'll get more into that in later episodes, but we'll just stick with the basics for now. So with even just moderate braking, we can see here, you can use that weight transfer to start turning the car with very little steering input. Tires are rubber, so increased weight means a bigger contact patch on the road. More contact with the road means more available mechanical grip. The opposite happens for the rear tires, but we have some tricks for addressing that issue that we'll go into later. The second thing that happens is that the front suspension is put under a heavier load while the rear is put under a lighter load. This is overlooked by a lot of drivers. Keep in mind that on tracks with a lot of bumps or elevation changes, you need to consider what you're asking of the suspension. The coil and damper are already dealing with the weight transfer of braking, so hitting a curb can cause over travel, where instead of the wheel moving up and down from the vertical forces with just a little bit of force transferred to the body, you now have a lot more extra energy going straight into the body of the car. So as the body of the car starts to travel up, it gets really unsettled, you're messing with the balance again. That's also going to reduce the grip on the front tire. And then we have to start tweaking with things like bound and rebound rates to try to get the tire pushed back down to the track, but that's a huge rabbit hole and a whole video on its own that's going to cover suspension later. The third thing that happens, you lose aerodynamic grip. Less speed means slower airflow. So while the increased grip from the weight transfer largely negates this for the front tires, it can amplify the loss of the grip in rear tires pretty dramatically. This is dependent on the car, its behavior, setup, and a number of other factors, but a big factor that can mitigate this is brake bias. The script of this episode is already pretty bulky, so a deep dive on brake bias will have to wait, but for now, just understand that it really is like a magic trick of racing. With a literal button press, you can change the handling characteristics of a car and gain time in every corner. So it's important to remember that your brakes are on opposite sides of the vehicle's center of gravity. Depending on where that is, the distance can be varied, but the principle stays the same. The brakes at the front are slowing down tires that have weight pushing on them. The brakes at the rear are slowing down tires that have weight pulling on them. The more braking force applied to the rear, the more likely it is to lock them up. Combine this with less weight, less aero, you can start to see why, generally speaking, Not that you want to lock up your tires at all, but when testing out brake bias, it's generally considered a good idea to get the front tires to lock up first. So, physics are all well and good, but how do we put this into practice? That's the whole point of this series. Well, every corner requires a different technique, but as a general rule, we can try to enter turns like this. So, as we're approaching a turn, the first thing to do is get a smooth blend of releasing the throttle and squeezing on the brake. Smooth, not slow. You want to reach peak braking efficiency quickly, since the momentum of the wheels makes it harder to lock them up in a straight line when you're at higher speeds. This is referred to as threshold braking. We're going to get right up to the edge of either locking the wheels or triggering the ABS, which conveniently is a great way of realizing you're braking too hard on cars that have it installed. It's a good idea to find an ABS setting that works for you for racing, but in practice, don't be afraid to dial it down to like its lowest setting just to see how close you can get to that limit. So we're doing the bulk of slowing the car down in this threshold braking phase, and we're going to do it with pretty much no steering input. We want as much of the grip being used to get the car at the correct speed for entry. When it's time to turn in though, we have to keep in mind we're already asking the tires to do a lot, so we have to start to roll out of the brake as we increase steering angle. This is called trail braking, but I've watched lap guides and tutorials for short track races at stuff like Martinsville, and a lot of oval drivers refer to it as dragging the brakes into the turn. It's not really a bad analogy either. We're not slowing down the car anywhere near as much as we are in threshold, just enough to keep the weight shifted forward so we can make those millimeter perfect steering inputs and make sure we're lined up just right for the apex and eventually the exit of the turn. That last 10% of brake release is usually the most important part because it's setting you up for that exit. Being able to put power down on the exit of the turn is our ultimate goal. So as you brake less, that weight's going to shift rearward, your steering input can stay the same, but the car won't rotate as much. That's why it's so important to practice a turn over and over. You have to figure out just the right timing on brake release to make sure the moment that you're lined up for a good exit is the same moment that you're coming off of the brakes. You do it too soon, you'll spend a lot of time freewheeling mid-corner. You do it too late, you'll run wide and compromise exit speed. Most drivers hold heavy braking too long because they're understandably worried about running off the track and into a wall, but also because they've been beaten over the head with this mantra of slow in, fast out. I think that's kind of a crap mantra. I think we should forget it and go with smooth in, fast out. It's really difficult to decide when to start bleeding off braking force, but that's where telemetry can save us some time. If you're not using telemetry to understand your driving style, you're making a huge mistake. You can learn in just a few minutes of looking at data what might take hundreds of laps to figure out on your own. We can see this example here. This is turn 1 at Watkins Glen. The driver in red is braking way too hard initially, and then releasing the brake way too quickly. The driver in blue has a pretty quick application, but brakes with much less force initially, and most importantly, they release the brakes slower and later. If we look at their speeds, the red driver is way faster, almost 4/10 just in that turn. You repeat that process through each turn throughout a lap, even over a 15-minute race, the importance of brake release becomes gargantuan. The driver in red is sticking to that Jackie Stewart method of prioritizing bleeding off the brakes. It requires a ridiculous amount of practice. It also requires a good brake pedal. Braking has been the biggest change for me going from a gamepad to a wheel. I thought the extra fidelity and precision in steering was going to be the real revolutionary aspect of ditching the controller. I was dead wrong. The brakes are the real important change. That left trigger on a gamepad, on a controller, it's just measuring linear input. It completely robs you of the feel you need to roll out of the brakes and maximize speed through the turns. And feel really is the right word for it. You might have to make some on-the-fly changes to your brake release depending on the traffic, or stuff like tire wear, fuel consumption. It's an easy concept to understand, but mastery of this braking technique takes a very, very long time. Well, once again, we've gone over on the time I was aiming for, but really, good braking technique is the premier skill to master if you want to be competitive. You have to practice. You have to practice a lot. I try to aim for at least an hour a day if I can. It doesn't always happen, but it's a good goal to aim for. Definitely study telemetry. And don't forget that some things with sim racing you can actually practice in your road car. Rolling off the brake is one of those things. Try it in your daily driver. If it slows you a little bit in a turn or in a parking lot somewhere and somebody honks at you, just let them know you're practicing driving imaginary cars. As you get a better feel for braking, you will see your lap time start to improve. I cannot stress it enough. It is, outside of the mental aspect, it is the most important skill you can learn to be a quick driver. I can't really think of a better message to end this video on, so we will wrap it up there. Episode 4, no real time frame on that as it's the middle of the holidays, but I'm going to get working on it as soon as I can.